Alrighty, here we are, clauses and conjunctions. We'll start off with clauses. What is a clause? A clause is a group of words with its own subject and verb. You can think of it, if you like math, as clauses equal S plus V, or subject plus verb. There are two types of clauses. There are dependent clauses. They are part of something else. They are dependent on a main or an independent clause. They can't stand by themselves. For example, there are dependent clauses. They are part of something else. Here are a few examples. Although there was a plague, there is a subject there, a verb, was, but this sentence leaves us hanging. It can't stand by itself. The second one, because I love books. I is our subject and love is our verb. When Titans ruled the world. Titans is our subject, ruled is our verb. Now you'll notice that there are three words, although, because, and when. And when those words are there, this whole clause becomes dependent. So what we'll learn later is that these three words are called subordinating conjunctions because they make this information less important than other information. But we'll learn that the whole thing is called a dependent clause. So the subordinating conjunction is part of the dependent clause. The other type of clause is a main or an independent clause. This is a complete thought. Here we have, half of the school was sick. That can stand by itself. Half is our subject, was is our verb. Everyone wore their pajamas. Everyone is the subject, wore is the verb. And then again, reliable students use agendas. Reliable is the subject, students is the verb. Moving on. Here are the coordinating conjunctions. When something is coordinated, it's equal and it's working together. The coordinating conjunctions, there are just a few of them. You can remember them by thinking of fanboys. Now, no one really knows what that means, but it's, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Some people like to remember this as yaff-nobs, but I think fanboys is a little easier to remember. When you have a coordinating conjunction, that separates two independent clauses. So those two independent clauses are equal. They're coordinating and working together. And what you'll always need before a coordinating conjunction is a comma. Now, here's the other type of conjunction. It's called subordinating. When you think of subordinating, think of submarine. Sub is a prefix that means under. So when you have a subordinating conjunction, whatever follows that is less important than the remaining part of the sentence. So the subordinating conjunction will be part of the dependent clause, and that whole dependent clause is less important than the independent or main clause. Here are a few examples. After, although, because, before, even though. You get the idea. When you put these words first, then you can't have a complete thought because they all leave you hanging. Now we're going to look at how to put all of this together. What we notice here is that we are going to start by looking at commas. We're going to circle all the commas. I'm not going to circle them on here because that's impossible, but you can circle them. So the first question, what you always need before you use one of the fanboys words, those are the coordinating conjunctions, to separate two main clauses. The answer, a comma, because the comma and the fanboys, those are the glue that keeps those independent clauses together. Now, your job is to write a sentence using each of the 7 fanboys words. But before you do that, you want to figure out how they function, what their function is, because they're all a little bit different. While they all make things coordinate, they do have different functions. So the for is the F. That functions like a because, and you can always just substitute because in your mind to see if you're doing it correctly. And connects things or ideas. Nor is negative, but it has two negatives. So you can think of it as a double negative if you'd like. But creates contrast or opposition. It's an opposite. Or gives you a choice. Yet is similar to but often the thing or the idea that comes after the yet is a little bit more positive. And the so is a cause and effect. So, for example, let's look at for, because sometimes people have trouble with that one because it sounds a little formal. So you could say something like, the amazing student came early to school, comma, for he wanted to do well that day. Okay, so the for there functions like a because, but it's a little bit different. It's a coordinating conjunction. Okay, so your job is to create a clause, a main clause, comma, use that fanboys, and then create another main clause. So that means you'll have at least two subjects and two verbs going on in each one of these sentences. Now let's look at some examples. Here's a pattern. Subordinating conjunction, dependent clause, and main clause. We already know that the subordinating conjunction is going to be part of the dependent clause. So let's pick one. We can go back to our sheet. For the sake of time, I'll just pick one, after. So now we have to think after, and then we have to think of a clause that would go with it. So after Odysseus survived the sirens, comma, now we need another main clause. He continued to sail, period. So what we have here is when we have the dependent clause first, we need a comma to make it hang on to the main clause. Think about it this way. If the dependent clause is first, it can't hold up the sentence. So it needs that glue of the comma to stick it to the main clause. Now, let's look at one that's the opposite. The main clause, subordinating conjunction, dependent clause. So we can actually just flip that around. So we could say, Odysseus continued to sail, that's our main clause, after he survived the sirens. In this case, you'll see there's no comma because the main clause is strong. It can stand by itself and it can hold up a dependent clause. So when we go from main to dependent, no comma. When we go from dependent to main, we need a comma because those dependent clauses are weak and we need that comma glue to hold it all together. And that concludes clauses and conjunctions.